Hey everyone, welcome to the channel, or welcome back to the channel. This is Living in Columbus, Ohio, and today I'm bringing another amazing episode as we're going to compare living in the city versus living in the suburb here in Columbus, Ohio. You're not going to want to miss this one. What's up, everyone? My name is Brad Winter, and if this is your first time to the channel, go ahead and tap on that subscribe button, click on the bell, give us a like, drop a comment. Whatever you need to do, please do it, because that notifies everybody when we drop a new video. And in these videos, we talk about everything that you need to know about living in the Columbus metro or surrounding areas. Now, I am a licensed real estate agent in the state of Ohio, and as much as I love doing these videos for you guys, I would love nothing more to help you with your real estate needs. So if you're thinking about making a move, relocating, if you live here and you need help buying or selling real estate, make sure you reach out to me. The number that just popped up below, call me, text me, shoot me an email, whatever you need to do, make sure you do it. I'm going to answer the phone. I'm going to help you, and we're going to make everything happen that you need to when it comes to living in Columbus metro or the surrounding areas. All right, on today's episode, we're going to talk about what it's like to live in the city of Columbus versus living in the suburbs that surround Columbus. We're going to talk about the pros and cons. We're going to talk about schools. We're going to talk about everything that you can imagine that kind of will help you make a decision whether you want to live more in the metro area or if you want to go out to the suburbs and do that kind of song and dance out there. So let's jump into it right now. The first thing that I want to talk about is the commute and traffic patterns when it comes to living in the city versus living in the suburbs. So one thing that I tell all my clients that relocate here is getting around Columbus, in my opinion, is about as easy as it gets, especially if you are moving from somewhere that has miserable traffic, a California, a Chicago, a New York, Florida. All these areas that people come from, they have really bad kind of traffic patterns, or just rush hour traffic could be a nightmare. So first, if you're living in the city of Columbus, getting around is relatively easy. Cool thing is Columbus is, pretty much a young city. So a lot of, I guess not maps, but how things are laid out is really on a grid. So you don't have a ton of one-ways going on. You don't have a ton of weird curves and things in the road. Like if you go to Pittsburgh, that place is a nightmare to drive around. Columbus is relatively easy. Roads are set up north and south, east and west. I mean, if you do a look down on the city of Columbus, you can see everything's set up like this. So I think that's pretty easy if you're living in the city. You can be in downtown, you can, take High Street and go all the way to Worthington, or you can zip on 315 and go that way. There's all sorts of easy ways that you can get to places if you're living downtown. Another thing too about living in downtown that's a pro is you could ride your bike, you could hop on a scooter, you can Uber. You can get around that way versus out in the suburbs. You're probably not going to hop on a scooter to go from Dublin to Powell, right? More than likely, you're not going to do that. So there is that kind of advantage about living in the city. Now, if you are in the suburbs, or if you're thinking about being in the suburbs and you work downtown, depending on which suburb and how far into that suburb that you are, you're looking at anywhere from a 20 to 40 minute commute. And 40 minutes is a worst case scenario, really. So, a lot of people when they move here, they say I work downtown, I want an easy commute. And then when they get here and they, maybe they want to live in New Albany or Powell or Pickerington, and they figure out oh my gosh, this commute is really easy. It makes making these decisions a little bit easier. So something to think about, when you're moving here, or if you're looking to make a move, it's just what is your lifestyle? What's the convenience factor? All these things are going to kind of play into what you can expect on a commute, kind of your traffic. But again, I've said this before in a lot of different episodes. If you look at a map of Columbus, you're going to see an outer belt that circles Columbus. That's 270. And I feel like you can drive in one big circle and rarely get stuck in any sort of traffic. Now, if there's an accident, if there's construction going on, that's different. But for the most part, at any point in the day, that's really flowing pretty easily because they have so many exits that you can get off and go into the suburbs, dip down to the city. You have 315 that runs north and south. You have 70 that runs east and west, 71 that runs through the city. So you have this interesting dynamic of highways that you can take to get to different places. So I just think the traffic here is super simple, and Columbus makes it really easy to get around. Now, if you're going to be living here, we got to talk about the types of homes that you can expect. So let's start in the suburbs. If you are looking to be out here, you are looking, at homes that are built in the 70s and 80s and on. Construction's a little bit different. You have more space. In some neighborhoods, they're going to be more established, where maybe the lots are a little bit bigger, the trees are grown in. But just the way Columbus has grown so fast over the last, we'll call it 20 years, there's so much new construction and new development that has gone on. You get a lot of these tract homes where they're going to be stacked right next to each other. Maybe the development isn't as grown up as some other places in the suburbs. So you don't have a lot of big trees. You don't have things that have really developed, right? You kind of get this bare land, bunch of houses stacked next to each other effect. If you like that, great. That might be something to look at. You're definitely going to get more room in a house. You're going to get newer construction. More than likely, you're going to have newer HVAC, all those type of things. They're going to be more of a modern build, you should say. Now, there are some areas, like I mentioned before, in the suburbs that are more established. They're older neighborhoods. Maybe they are houses that were built in the 50s or 60s. So that's something to think about as well. But for the most part, you're going to kind of get that suburban feel where your neighbor is essentially, an arm's length away from you. So that's just something you want to consider, when making a move is that the type of lifestyle that you need, that you want, that you desire? If not, maybe living in the city will help, or kind of not help you, but is more of what you want. So here in Columbus, a lot of houses that were built depending on which area of the city. I mean, some of these houses in German Village were built in the late 1800s, 1900s, so you can have that style of home. There's other areas that, we'll call them the early 1900s to 1940s and 50s. A lot of these homes were built. You're going to get a lot of brick. You're going to get all sorts of kind of maybe older style of home of how it was laid out. So a lot of times when I'm in these houses, you will see closets that are, they're like this deep and this wide. And you're like, oh my gosh, like how would anybody in today's world fit all their clothes in there? So if the home has not been developed, you should think about that. Also, your lot, depending on where you're at, more than likely will be smaller, or at least it will be more narrow than maybe at home in the suburbs. And then also parking. So this could be something that's important to you is, do you want off-street parking, or do you mind parking on the street essentially? And in areas such as German Village, having a garage is like hitting the lottery, basically. I talked to an appraiser one time, and he said, depending on the house, a garage could be worth an extra $50,000 to $100,000 of value on a home, because that's how scarce it is to have a garage in German Village. Now, other areas of the city, that's not the case. That's a little bit more on the extreme end, but that is something to think about. When you're in the suburbs, more than likely you have a garage, you have a driveway, so you have the kind of that off-street parking capability. So again, something to think about. A lot of people that also move here, maybe they don't want a home, so they want to live in condos. When you live in condos in the suburbs, they're going to be more, we'll just call it kind of like general apartment living in essence. Condos in the city, sometimes you're in older buildings, sometimes you're in mixed-use buildings, sometimes you're in brand new development inside of these little older communities. So it's a little bit different look and feel. A lot of times in the city, those condominium communities or buildings, they will have more amenities than maybe out in the suburbs. So again, there's some pros and cons to each, but something to consider when thinking about what type of home that you want to live in our area. Another thing to think about or compare when living in the city versus living in the suburbs is our schools. So I talk about schools on here. I feel like every episode it comes up because people make a lot of decisions based on schools. So if you just, get on niche.com right now, type in top school districts, Central Ohio, public schools, what you're going to come up with is number 1, Dublin, then New Albany, then Olentangy, then Bexley, and then Upper Arlington. Those are the top 5 school districts in Central Ohio, according to niche.com. Now, one thing I did not say there is Columbus City schools. They are not ranked very high, and that is something you can find on a lot of different rating sites. And niche.com, you have to actually get to the second page to find Columbus City. So that's something you want to think about if you are really concerned about schools, or even if you're thinking about what is resale value for me and is school district something that I think about, then living in Columbus City School District might not be the best move for you. You might want to look into one of the school districts that I listed out or others that are on the list. This is something that is always a topic of conversation anytime I'm with a client that maybe is not too familiar with Columbus, or maybe they're not sure what their best move is because they're not having kids for a while. So, I always talk about pros and cons. Let's say you're relocating here and your kids are already graduated from high school, they're in college, and you want to live more, the kind of that urban lifestyle, then heck yeah, buy a house or a condo in the city, have all the amenities that the city, offers you as far as walkability and close to restaurants and shops and, all those types of things. That's probably going to be a great move for you if you want those types of things. If you are relocating here or moving here and you have children, or you're thinking about having children in the near future, and school districts are important to you, then I think we have to do a really big deep dive on what the schools are in the areas that you're looking. That's always going to be important. And also just the resources of these schools. Unfortunately, this is a known fact. The Columbus City School District, the resources, they are not as good, in my opinion, and in others' opinions out there, as maybe a Dublin or a New Albany or Pickerington, something like that. And there was a strike last year for Columbus City school teachers, and because they weren't getting the resources and the amenities that they need, in their classrooms to help them, really do their job effectively. So that's something to think about as well. If you have kids and you're going to be sending them there, is that important to you? And if it's not, hey, that's okay. But if it is, then I would say probably look maybe at other school districts that potentially would meet your children's needs better. So again, schools, something to look at whether you're living in the city or you're headed to the suburbs. Number 4 on our list of things to think about when living in the city or the suburbs would be the proximity to everything. So let's start in the city. When you live in the city, you're close to pretty much everything, right? You can a lot of times walk out your front door. You can be within an earshot of a park, of a restaurant, of a coffee shop. That is the lifestyle that you are choosing and wanting. So as far as being close to amenities, that is a huge plus of living in the city. Now, when you live in the suburbs, a lot of times, if you want a cup of coffee, you got to get in your car, you got to go to Starbucks, right? If you want to go to a park, you got to get in the car and you got to drive a few miles to a park. So there's that kind of, I don't know if that's an inconvenience for some people. Some people could care less, but you think about the pros and cons of each and what is going to meet your lifestyle. Another thing about living in the city is, you can walk to sporting events. So we have, the Blue Jackets, which is our NHL team. We have the Columbus Crew. We have the Clippers, Ohio State football or basketball or other sports at Ohio State. And when you live in the city, depending on where you live, you could ride your bike, you could hop on one of those Lime scooters, you could walk, take a quick Uber. All those things make getting to those events and activities a lot easier than if you're in the suburbs and you have to get in your car, drive down, find parking at maybe a parking garage downtown or a parking lot, or maybe you have to park a while away and then grab an Uber to get down here. There's that maybe potential inconvenience or hassle that you want to think about. And it also just goes back with your lifestyle. If you're somebody that could care less about sporting events and you're never going to go, then who cares, right? But if you're active and you have kids and you're taking them to these things, maybe you want to be closer to the city or in the city, and some of these maybe better school districts like a UA or Bexley, which not technically in the city, but they're pretty close. Another thing to talk about with proximity is just like our grocery stores, right? Now, I will say, I think the city of Columbus does a really bad job of giving their little niche neighborhoods grocery options, right? Like, it still baffles me that a Trader Joe's or a Whole Foods is not somewhere, in the Italian Village, Victorian Village area where, you have the clientele and the people that want to shop there. They don't really have options. They have to go to a Giant Eagle maybe or a Kroger, which is fine, but maybe that's not where they want to go. Maybe they want to buy more organic and healthy stuff. And if they got to do that, then they got to get in their car and they got to go to UA, to Whole Foods. They got to go maybe up to Dublin or Easton to a Trader Joe's. So there's not that kind of convenience factor for as far as grocery shopping or like big box retail specifically. That's really not going to be like a huge option in the city. Now, if you live in the suburbs, yes, you're going to have to drive to those places still, but you at least have those options, and those options generally are not too far away depending on where you live in the city. So again, just weighing the proximity weighing the proximity to things when you live in the city versus suburbs, something to think about. Last but not least, let's talk about like recreation, nightlife. Obviously, if you live in the burbs, nightlife probably isn't going to be popping. But if you live in the city, you definitely have more of those options, the bars, the restaurants that stay open late, maybe some potential clubs here in Columbus. I'm kind of old now, and I'm a dad, not really going to the clubs. So I don't even know if there's a lot of clubs that exist in Columbus anymore, to be honest. But I do know if you're living in the city, you definitely have kind of more options as far as that nightlife and restaurant food scene is concerned. If you live in the burbs, it's a little bit more scarce. Maybe you got to go more of the commercial route to some of these places to do that. So again, it's all about convenience. And, honestly, if you live in the city, it's a quick Uber ride or you can walk places. If you live in the suburbs, you got to drive 20 to 40 minutes or you got to get an Uber 20 to 40 minutes. You're not really like coming down the city walking or riding a bike to do those types of things. So again, pros and cons with each, but also when we talk about like maybe parks or biking trails or any of those types of stuff, again, there's pros and cons to where you live. In the city, you definitely have access to more, like a smaller parks or maybe the more historic ones like Goodale or Schiller, and you've got some trails in the city, but a lot of that stuff is going to be located, in the big metro parks outside of the city, in the suburbs, where there's, the land mass is a lot larger than it is in the city when it comes to these parks and, some of the amenities that they have as well. So again, thinking about just recreational activities. Another thing too is, for instance, having kids, in the city, there's community centers. You have parks that they can go shoot hoops on. But again, they're not really going and playing on a large soccer field or a baseball diamond, really a lot of different places. I mean, we have Berliner Fields, which is, right in the city, which is always packed every weekend. But as far as just maybe overall selection of sports and where to like go do those things at, city's not going to have a ton of options. It seems to be like out in the suburbs, they have these massive, community centers with, it seems like miles of soccer fields and lacrosse fields and basketball courts and baseball diamonds and softball diamonds and all those things. So, I think living in the suburbs lends itself more to having more recreational options possibly than maybe living in the city. So there you have it. There is a quick comparison of living in the city versus living in the suburbs. We talked about some pros and cons. We talked about, different types of houses, the schools, level of convenience to the things. So, I hope this was helpful. If you're somebody that's making a move, if you're relocating, if you already live here and you need help, kind of making a decision regarding a lot of this stuff, if you're looking to buy a home, anything real estate related, I'm going to be your guy. Make sure you give me a call, shoot me a text, fire off an email, do whatever you got to do. I'm going to have your back when it comes to making a real estate move here in the Columbus metro or surrounding areas. And until next time, thanks for tuning in.